Style over substance. It's a thing, like a cheap car with aftermarket aero stuck all over it, like a sleazy salesman with gold chains draped everywhere. Sometimes how something looks is a deliberate attempt to fool the world. I wondered as I unboxed the striking looking D&A Alpha Pro if this was one of those moments. The marketing would suggest that the performance of the D&A Alpha Pro was more of a priority than its looks, but we all know what hi-fi marketing can be like. And speaking of marketing, the Alpha Pro was sent to me by Shenzhen Audio, but they have no influence over this video. And as I connected the Alpha Pro and began to take a listen, the cracks started to show. Don't turn away just yet though, because this is a more complex story than it appeared at first. If you haven't already heard of the Alpha Pro, it's a $699 DAC, headphone amp, and preamp, sort of. It's built around the premium ES9039MSPRO DAC chip from ESS, and it has a discrete amplifier stage. In most cases, discrete amplifier circuits are better than the ones built around op amps, so there was some promise here. Unfortunately, before I could get to hearing if that promise was going to be fulfilled, I had to work out how to read the front panel of the Alpha Pro. There are two reasons for that. Firstly, I was blinded by the extremely bright lights of the Alpha Pro when I first switched it on. I love the concept of the lighting system on the Alpha Pro, but I think maybe a more subtle approach would have worked better. There's some new firmware now that has improved the brightness issues a little bit, but it can still be a little bit overwhelming, especially in dark rooms, unless you turn off the lighting. So that was the first problem. The second problem is one we've seen before. The designers at D&A chose to place grey labelling on a clear faceplate with a silver background. Not only that, there's then bright backlighting behind the faceplate. That's a recipe for zero readability unless you get your viewing angle just right. And that means you're going to need to remember which of these buttons does which function and in what order of selection. For the gain button, it's pretty straightforward. There's only 3 levels. Then there are the output modes. You're going to have to remember which one's line out, which one's pre-out, and which one's headphone out. All of these are fairly doable. But good luck consistently remembering which input is which. You've got Bluetooth, optical, coaxial, USB, and line input. It's a shame it's so hard to read the labels on the front of the Alpha Pro, because if you could read the labels better, it would remind you of one of the major strengths this device has over almost all of its competitors. In addition to being an all-in-one DAC, preamp, and headphone amp, the Alpha Pro can also be a headphone amp for a dedicated external source, such as a CD player, an external streamer, maybe a turntable with a phono preamp, whatever you want. It is a shame that the RCA line inputs on the back of the Alpha Pro will only work with the headphone amp, so this is not a true preamp as such, but it is still a nice feature to have for those looking for a headphone system. So things were fairly mixed for the Alpha Pro so far. Good features, great specs, questionable design even if it looks pretty. With 6 watts of power available into 32 ohm headphones, all of the specs on paper suggested that the Alpha Pro would be an excellent all-in-one desktop headphone solution. But that of course requires it to sound good. I should also clarify before we move on something that I said earlier about the preamp, and that is that the line input for the Alpha Pro will only feed through to the headphone stage, so you can't use it as a preamp for an external source. However, there is a preamp output mode for all of the digital sources. So if you're feeding the Alpha Pro with USB, coaxial, optical, or Bluetooth, all of those can have a volume controlled output to an external set of power amps, speaker amps, whatever you need. And so the only remaining question now, I think, is sonic performance. As I got started with my critical listening to the Alpha Pro, that was after just using it casually for a couple of weeks to really get to know it, the first thing I tested was the performance of the single-ended headphone output and the balanced headphone outputs. Both outputs sounded fine, but I think the balanced outputs definitely have an edge here. To my ears, the balanced outputs from the Alpha Pro produce a slightly wider soundstage and an increased sense of clarity and resolution. The differences weren't huge, but they were there, and enough that if you can, I'd recommend prioritizing the balanced headphone connections for the Alpha Pro over single-ended. It's not the end of the world for single-ended, it's just better with balanced. On the back of the device, where we've got all these different digital inputs, testing between those, with the exception of Bluetooth, revealed that they all perform fairly similarly. Obviously, the upstream device is going to have some say in the performance of the downstream device, but assuming you've got equivalent levels of quality across coaxial, optical, or USB, you're going to get pretty equivalent quality coming out of the Alpha Pro. In other words, there's no need to prioritize a specific input type, just go with what's most convenient. Overall, the sound from the Alpha Pro as a headphone source was detailed and smooth. It didn't blow me away, but sometimes that's a good thing. That normally means a device is delivering very natural and true-to-life sound, as opposed to playing tricks to make things sound more impressive. But of course, the best way to understand that was with some comparisons. One option I had on hand from a past review was the Loxjie D60. The D60 does everything the Alpha Pro does except have a line input, and it costs a fair bit less at $469. At least when I reviewed it, I haven't checked those prices lately. And you can definitely and immediately hear where the difference in price is going. The Alpha Pro is way more refined in the treble, and whilst the D60 is a nice unit, the Alpha Pro makes it sound rough by comparison. And then if we look beyond refinement, there's also sound staging. The Alpha Pro produces significantly more depth and layering in the soundstage when compared to the Loxjie D60. It was really a no contest between these two. I needed a fairer comparison. Luckily, a delivery arrived. In the oversized cardboard box on my doorstep were two products from FiiO: the brand new and remarkably innovative QX13 dongle DAC and the K15 DAC headphone amp and preamp combo. Both of those are coming up soon for review, so make sure you subscribe. And while we're speaking of subscribing, I've got a quick favour to ask. I'm making a push to try to reach 100,000 subscribers by the end of this year. It's a big, audacious goal, but that's why it's going to be fun. Right now, the channel has a little over 50,000 subscribers, and thank you to all of you who are part of that 50,000. Another number that's a bit more meaningful though, is that only 60-something% of viewers of my channel and my videos are subscribed to the channel. So if you're one of those people that's watching and enjoying my videos, but you haven't yet subscribed, please hit the subscribe button. It's free and it will really help me to continue making videos just like this for you. And of course, if you find in the future you don't need my videos anymore, you can always unsubscribe again. So thank you to all of you who were already subscribed, and thank you as well to all of you who just hit the subscribe button. It really means a lot. Now let's get back to the Alpha Pro and the FiiO K15. Because the FiiO K15 is a $549 device with very similar features to the Alpha Pro. In fact, it does everything the Alpha Pro does and has some very limited streaming capabilities too. As I listened to both devices, the K15 got much closer to the sound of the Alpha Pro than the Loxjie D60 had. That said, the Alpha Pro was still more refined and smoother than what I could get from the K15. The Alpha Pro produced a bit more space around each individual sound within the soundstage, and a little bit more depth as well. Both devices sounded excellent, and they did perform quite similarly, but the D&A Alpha Pro once again sounded more mature and more refined. And so at this point, I was fairly impressed with the Alpha Pro. To finalize my thoughts, I wanted to understand how it was performing as just a headphone amp and as just a DAC. Using a really high-end DAC feeding into the RCA sockets on the back of the Alpha Pro revealed that its headphone stage is excellent. Based on what you're paying for the Alpha Pro and all of the features you're getting for that money, I think the headphone stage is as good or better than I'd expect. In fact, you'll have a hard time beating the performance of the headphone stage in the Alpha Pro, even if you're spending as much money. Of course, amps like the Niche Pietas Maximus that I've reviewed recently will deliver buckets more fun than the Alpha Pro, but in terms of just the technical capabilities here, I think the Alpha Pro is working really well at its price, even as just a headphone amp. Turning then to the DAC stage of the Alpha Pro, that's also very strong. Connecting it to a high-end amplifier revealed that you can actually get excellent performance from the DAC and possibly squeeze a bit more performance out of it using external high-quality components rather than the onboard headphone stage, as good as that headphone stage is. And so all of this tells us that the design, the internal layout, everything about the Alpha Pro from a sound quality point of view is excellent. And yet, as I arrived at the end of my review process with the Alpha Pro, one thing really stood out to me. I'm not excited by it. It does everything right. It's technically very, very capable and does nothing at all wrong. It sounds better than any of its nearest competitors that I could put my hands on. But it just leaves me a little bit cold. I don't say that to suggest that you should go out and buy any other product specifically. More so I say it to manage expectations. Some devices that I use and review at all different price levels create an instant connection with the music. They hardwire the music to my heart and soul. The Alpha Pro doesn't do that, but I also can't put my finger on why. It's not doing anything wrong, it just doesn't do that magic. It's a very, very good device that does everything it aims to do very, very well. It probably measures better than the niche Piatus Maximus that I mentioned a moment ago, and the built-in DAC in the Alpha Pro is going to be way better than the add-on DAC card that you can buy as an extra cost in the niche Piatus Maximus. But the Piatus Maximus brings me a level of enjoyment and engagement and a desire to listen to the music that I can't quite find in the Alpha Pro. In all other ways though, the Alpha Pro is impeccable for its price. And for many people, this is going to be a better device than the niche Piatus Maximus. It's way more versatile. I think off the top of my head, it might be more powerful. And for those seeking pristine measurements and theoretically pristine performance, the Alpha Pro is probably the better choice. And so if you like the look of it, and I do think it looks cool so long as you don't want to read the labels, and if you like the features of it, which are excellent, the D&A Alpha Pro is a very strong offering. However, if you're chasing musical engagement and excitement, you might want to look elsewhere. Apologies if that's a bit of an unclear conclusion, but I can't quantify musical engagement. I can only share with you how the Alpha Pro made me feel. You might feel completely differently, and if you do, there's links in the description down below where you can buy the Alpha Pro. And if you already have bought the Alpha Pro, let us know in the comments, does it stir your emotions? If it does, what headphones have you found work really well with it? I tried a heap of different headphones with it, and none of them really blew me away, but maybe you've had a different experience, so let us all know in the comments below. And of course, if you're one of those people like me that's more about chasing that musical connection, that audio nirvana, then you have to watch the video I've pinned here at the end. So check that one out next. But for now, a huge thanks to YouTube channel members, also to channel Patreon members, and to those of you who leave super thanks on videos like this one. And until next time, happy listening, be kind to each other, and I'll see you here again soon on Passion for Sound.